Headliners, a discussion with people who make the news. A public affairs presentation of the Oklahoma News Network. This is Doug Fox. Our guest this week on Headliners is the Chancellor of Higher Education in Oklahoma, Dr. E.T. Dunlap. Doctor, perhaps a good place to start is preface the first question with a little background perhaps for our listeners. The state regents for higher education will be asking the next session of the legislature for an estimated $113 million for our institutions of higher education, a 42% increase over this year's budget. The governor has proposed a $14 million hike for higher education next year, and the state regents requesting almost a $34 million more. Now, who's going to lose that confrontation? Your figure is much higher than the governor's. How do you think it's going to come out?
Well, Doug, that's a very good question. First, let me say that the state regents have a constitutional responsibility to try to define the needs of Oklahoma higher education and to present this recommendation as to the needs to the legislature and the governor, and to try to follow up, to document, to substantiate the figure being requested for what we think is reasonably adequate support for Oklahoma higher education programs. Now, the amount which will be requested of the coming legislature is, as you mentioned, a budget of $171,000 with $171 million, with $113 million to come from legislative appropriations, and the balance of some $58 million to come from student fees and tuition of non-resident students and other sort of what we call revolving fund income. Now, I don't know what for sure the legislature is going to plan to do in the way of appropriations toward meeting this, what we think is the real needs of Oklahoma higher education. And I have not as yet seen the governor's budget proposal. I did read in the newspaper Sunday that his budget proposal would contain an estimated $14 million increase for higher education. I believe it was mentioned this might include some money for some special projects, and just how much that is and for what kind of special projects I'm not informed just now. Now, if we get $14 million toward our bread and butter budget we're requesting of $34 million, well, then that means one thing. But if we are receiving some less than $14 million for current operating budget support, then how that will measure against 34 is another thing. We're looking forward to the legislative session, though, and we're hoping that higher education will be considered very seriously in the priorities.
Now, I know that there is a figure, or at least some point here, where higher education can either remain still or regress or go forward. What's it going to take just to maintain the operations of our state-supported colleges and universities at the level at which they're operating now?
Well, there's no way to definitively say what we must have to stand still or what we must have to advance. There is a way, according to certain standards that we have established, that we compare Oklahoma higher education with, and these standards are based on like-type institutions in our neighboring states, in the region. We can determine how much money we need to come up to what we call the regional standards, and we think we need $34 million new dollars. And with this $34 million, here's what we would do with it if it were made available. 36.5% would be used for teaching, for instruction, for improving the instructional program. By improving, I mean we would better support some new programs that have been started that we haven't had adequate funds to support properly. We would add some new programs that are direly needed in the fields of health sciences, in nursing and dentistry and other health-related areas. In the field of technical education, I mean post-secondary technical education, the type that's taught with 2 or 3 years of college education required. We would also hire some additional teachers to relieve the overcrowded classrooms where they exist. We would improve in the tools with which teachers teach and with students learn. I say 36% plus of this new money would go for instruction, improving the instructional program. 32.4% would go for improving the organized research, extending research, and accomplishing further support of programs to explore and find new knowledge. 18% would go for strengthening our libraries. 5% would be added to the operation of the maintenance of the physical plant budget. And 1.6% less would be expended for administration of the programs. So this analyzed is what we need the $34 million new dollars for the various colleges, universities in Oklahoma. Of course, I could get more detail, tell you how many more students we're going to have, and how many more teachers we need, and where we need them, and the like.
One of the complaints that's been aired against higher education in the past when it comes up to funding higher education is that there's a lot of fat on our campuses. Has the fat been trimmed out of the higher education budget?
Well, Doug, when you operate any kind of a business, and higher education is business, it's big business for the public, $171 million educational budget, along with over $100 million student services budget, including housing and food services and this sort of a thing. In other words, upwards of $250 million of business operation annually in Oklahoma higher education. You're going to have some so-called fat. You're going to have some, shall we say, lesser than adequate management in the fiscal procedures employed. You certainly must be constantly evaluating the procedures, what you do, and whether we're doing it the best way, in order to make the budget dollars count the most. Now, we're making some progress in eliminating unnecessary duplication. Certainly, we have some unnecessary duplication yet in existence. Programs that have been established in years gone by to meet needs then, and the needs now do not necessarily call for programs to be offered to this extent. It takes time to do away with those and to put new programs in their place. It takes more money to offer the programs being demanded today than it does to offer programs such as teacher education. In the days of the past, we're training twice as many teachers today as we need, as we have jobs in Oklahoma for. Now, we're changing that pattern gradually. Some of us are impatient about the progress that we're making, the rate at which we're able to make change. Yes, there's improvement taking place in the efficiency and the effectiveness, in the accountability of what we do in Oklahoma college and university education.
One of the areas where I know some fat trimming is going on is at Northeastern State College in Tahlequah. We understand letters have been sent out the first of this month to 13 faculty members at Northeastern, effectively severing their services for the next school year, and 8 of those 13 have tenure. Have you received any flack yet from the American Association of University Professors about this cutback?
Well, yes, we've heard some of the chat that's going on about it. This is an instance in which an institution is sort of boldly facing up to an effort to do away or to eliminate some budget activity that's no longer needed because of, in the case of this particular institution, there's been a loss of enrollment. I think they're kind of stabilized now, and it gradually will come back. But there's a changing character at the institution insofar as the educational program is concerned. There is considerable effort over there to change the kinds of programs to be offered and to reduce the staff and the resources required for offering programs that have been offered in the past, and making adjustments to the new programs to be offered perhaps for a lesser number of people than what had previously been projected. We don't hire people at this level, as you know. The governing board of an institution hires and fires and assigns duties of employees. We do hear about these things going on. There is a good effort, I'd say, at that institution to try to improve its fiscal efficiency.
Do you know of any other institutions where tenured faculty members are having to be let go across the state?
Well, I don't know of any others just now where there are plans for eliminating or reducing faculty. There could very well be. I haven't heard of any just now.
Getting down to brass tacks now on the fight over revenue in this next session. The governor, as I said, proposed a $14 million program. Some of that, $3 to $4 million, is federal revenue sharing money. Is that kind of a budget adequate?
Well, no, in my judgment, it isn't, Doug. I would be obligated formally, number one, and I professionally believe in the soundness of the state regent's recommendation. I might mention to you that the colleges and universities, as their presidents appeared before our board here in October, requested some 24 million more than the state regents are requesting of the legislature. Our board, through careful study, through very cautious analysis of the research and the problems, concluded that we could very well substantiate with the facts a $34 million budget proposed increase. I believe in it, and I think we can prove it. And I think the governor and the legislature would be inclined to agree with what we present them. Whether they can provide the money to meet this appropriation is, of course, their responsibility. We're going to do everything we can to advance the merits of this budget proposal, which I think is reasonably adequate. I think it's very conservatively put together. I think we can justify the need for every dollar we're asking for.
Public school education, of course, has traditionally gotten the lion's share of state funds spent on education. The governor has pledged 75% of the increased revenues coming to the state to education, but some college professors, university professors, we hear it's said that it's beneath their dignity to come to, quite frankly, to come to the legislature and grub for money for higher education. Now, what can be done to kind of reverse that type of thinking and get the lobby to the legislature that's necessary to get increased funding, substantially increased funding for higher education?
Well, Doug, I'm one who believes that the best way to sell the worthiness of education is to the people and to the legislators before they get in session. Now, of course, there are certain practical follow-up communication activities required, and that's the job of the state regents. Our Constitution was changed in 1941 to establish a state system and a coordinating board, and directing the legislature to appropriate in a lump sum to the board, thus removing the so-called political horse trading on the part of institutional representatives, senators and representatives in the legislature, of some institutions getting more money this year and others starving, and then next year, because some other institution senator happened to be chairman of the Appropriations Committee, why the thing would reverse itself. Now, what I'm saying is the legislature, finally, when they make a decision, they appropriate in a lump sum to the state regents, and the state regents are obligated to allocate according to needs and functions. Now, as we define the budget needs and submit to the legislature, we've set the pattern for allocating whatever funds the legislature provides. It's the regents' job, although we invite institutional leaders to back us up and join us in the legislative appropriation committee hearings. I really think teachers are out of place and coming to the legislature to lobby, be they public school teachers or college teachers. I think the legislature best respects we the people who are employed to work in education to stay on the jobs that we're hired to do. There's certain of the leaders that, of course, have a responsibility to communicate the needs to the legislature, and I've found the legislators more and more respecting this.
Yet, public school education still continually gets more money than higher ed. I don't want to get you in a battle with the OEA, but, you know, the proof is in the allotment of funds.
Yes, and I'll tell you what, there are more public school children in Oklahoma than there are college students in Oklahoma. There are more teachers in the public schools than there are in colleges. The public schools are closer to the homes of the parents, and the parents to the legislators. There's a little closer relationship. Higher education has had a problem, sure, because we've been a little removed. The bulk of the people in the years gone by haven't participated in higher education programs. Consequently, there has not been the same sort of feel of worth of colleges to we the people as there has been the elementary and secondary schools, where my little Johnny goes to school this morning, and I want him to have the best. Now, I might not have anybody in college, so I don't have the same degree of interest. That's nature with us, you know.
Mm-hmm. Let me pause at this point, Doctor, and remind our listeners the program is Headliners. Our guest this week is Dr. E.T. Dunlap, the Chancellor of Higher Education in Oklahoma. Doctor, the OU Health Sciences Center ran into financial trouble last summer, or perhaps a little earlier than that. They are still, I understand, some funds short, and yet Dr. Leonard Ilio, the director of the Health Sciences Center, the vice president out there, has said that they thought that they were going to be in fairly good financial shape come January. What is the status of the Health Sciences Center? Are we in jeopardy here of losing any services at the OU Medical Center?
Well, the state regent's budget recommendation that'll go to the legislature in January calls for a 55% increase in the state appropriated funds for the budget of the medical center for next year. Now, this is some $5.7 million, new state money, which we feel that we need to support the programs that have been approved to be operated at the medical center, including the new programs of dentistry and nursing, graduate nursing, and certain other health-related fields of education, as well as expanding the College of Medicine enrollment, the number of freshman intake, and the like. Now, we'll be able to get along and keep the medical center going, obviously, on less money than that, but we feel we need this to adequately fund the program. If we receive less than this, we feel that we can carry on. If we receive a substantial amount less than the 5.7 requested, then we will have financial problems again if we continue to operate and expand the operation of programs that are now authorized and authorize additional new programs of medical education as are in the waiting to be offered.
Are we dangerously watering the soup here, though, by expanding the medical center, say the Tulsa branch of the medical center, the School of Dentistry? We're expanding some of our medical programs, and yet we do not have apparently adequate funds to really support what we have in operation now. Are we dangerously watering the soup here?
Well, we have been expanding health science-related programs since the study made by the state regents in 1965, at which time we had only the School of Medicine. That's all was operated over here on Northeast 13th Street. So in 6 years, we've gone from a single School of Medicine operation to a multipurpose health sciences center, offering programs not only in medicine, almost doubling the number of freshmen input each year into the class, but we've added dentistry and we've added nursing, bachelor's degree level training programs in nursing. We've done away with a hospital diploma program. We've added graduate nurse education and a host of other health-related programs, some of which perhaps we should have probably deferred. Now, we've made progress, though, in the budget at the Health Sciences Center. In the last 6 years, we have increased by about 160 to 70% in the budget at the Health Sciences Center. True, the cost of operation has increased. Programs have been expanded. We've been receiving considerable federal funds over there for operations, which funds are being sort of curtailed or discontinued even. And as certain programs that have been taken on to be carried out with federal funds have lost the federal fund support, then those programs have been added over onto the budget, which has been defined to support programs that we had not anticipated supporting with state funds. There are several facets of the financial problem. We made a thorough study last summer, as you may recall, of the fiscal state of the Health Sciences Center, and concluded that obviously we need additional money, and that's evidenced further with the state regent's recommendation to the legislature. In this particular year, I understand that the Welfare Department and some other federal funds will relieve the critical condition over here. But there are other things taking place. According to Dr. Eliel, there's considerable changes being made in the fiscal management to make the dollar a little more accountable to the purpose for which it was allocated and to make it buy more service. So there's a mixture of various and sundry kinds of situations that bring on the financial problems. We think we're on the way toward improving and hopefully solving the medical center problems with new arrangements for management of the fiscal affairs, with unifying the budget, with trying to place it under the control of the fiscal management of the medical center and with improving the amount of funds available.
Federal courts, a couple of other things that may or may not affect the funding of higher education in Oklahoma. One of them is the federal court rulings here of late in some other states affecting the charge or extra charge, if you will, to non-resident students. The out-of-state student traditionally pays more at a state-operated college or university. What effect would this have on Oklahoma if these out-of-state or non-resident fees were shot down in federal court in Oklahoma?
Well, if we were to discontinue to collect the non-resident tuition, our operating budget of Oklahoma's system of higher education would in the current year be affected to the tune of about $5.5 million.
And you'd have to make that up presumably with a tuition hike to all the students across the board.
We would obviously be short in the budget of that amount of money. That is $5.5 million approximately this year. If we were to lose that fund, we would need to make it up, certainly, to hold our own. In other words, to stay at the level we are now from some source. The source that we'd call upon would be the state of Oklahoma to appropriate the money, add it on to our budget to replace the loss of those funds.
Well, you're not tinkering with the idea, though, of raising tuition fees to make up for that, are you?
Well, we have not given much thought to the problem yet. I'd say this. One way of replacing the money would be to raise the general enrollment fee on all students. I don't think that would be the proper way to do it.
One other thing, and that's the last year at the Appropriations Committee hearing on the higher education budget, there were references made, I know at that time, by State Senator Clem McSpadden, the new congressman now from northeastern Oklahoma, that the OU Gay Alliance at Norman at that time was going through a recognition crisis, if you will, down on the campus. Senator McSpadden made inferences at the time that if they were recognized, this might very well directly affect the funding of higher education. Do you see any rub-off effect here from the furor or the controversy that the OU Gay Alliance has caused? Any relationship between that and any kind of funding apprehensions on the part of the legislature?
Well, I might say this, Doug, that over the past 3 to 4 years, American higher education generally has sort of been in the doghouse, so to speak. That is, and understandably so, on the part of we the people, as we think of the various kinds of public services that are worthy of the people's support. We've been going through a period of frustration in higher education, of incidents on our various campuses, both the student and faculty, conduct which is sort of out of step, shall we say, with our societal standards. And however, we want to feel that we're maybe over that period and beginning to stabilize again in our general respect as we may be respected by the people. Higher education is a very important segment, and it has a direct relation to the welfare of our economy and to the advancement of our society and the standards of living. We've had a very small part of our student bodies that have caused us to get a sort of a black eye. We think this is healing. Sure, these things have had a bearing upon the people's readiness to put dollars into higher education. That's evidenced by the record. Not only the public dollars appropriated, but the private dollars donated from individuals and corporations and churches and the like. We hope we are over that period.
One of the other considerations when we talk about the funding of higher education, of course, is the federal dollars coming into the system. President Nixon has been sharply criticized in the past by some educators, not only in Oklahoma, but across the country, for his lack of concern or sensitivity, if you will, to the needs of research, the needs of higher education, particularly in the health areas. What kind of an effect can we, or what kind of an allocation in terms of federal dollars can we expect for higher education in the coming fiscal year? Are you optimistic? Are we still in a state of flux here with the realignment of the administration, or what?
Well, the new law signed by the President on the 23rd of June this year, called the Education Amendments 1972, which is an omnibus bill, and carries a continuation of legislation of many education programs that existed prior to this for both higher education and for public schools and for vocational education. And it also provides some new kinds of aid for higher education support. This authorization certainly sets the pattern for the federal government to get into business of education with the states and with institutions, with private institutions as well as state and public colleges and universities. None of these programs has of yet been funded. As a matter of fact, the U.S. Office of Education is in the process of trying to get guidelines developed for administration of this myriad of aid programs provided for in this omnibus law. If the authorization for aid to institutions, general aid to the budgets of institutions, aid for students in the form of tuition and scholarship grants to help them pay their costs to go to college, as well as other parts of the law, if they are funded, it will provide great help to higher education in this state as well as to colleges and universities generally in the nation in their efforts to change programs, to improve programs, to finance at a better level the operation. But whether we can expect funding in the year ahead for any of these programs is highly questionable at this time. My personal evaluation is that the economic picture at the national level is such that suggests a rather rigid approach to the fiscal funds available for all kinds of services in the year or two ahead, especially if the $250 billion spending limit is observed by the federal government. Even if Congress appropriates the funds to implement the new law, there will be a very rigid curtailment of the availability of the expending because of this particular policy of the administration. I'm one who believes that we ought to sort of tighten the economy up a little, all right, but I don't think we ought to do it altogether at the expense of education. I don't know that it will be done to the expense of education. But the federal funding in the immediate future probably will be on a very, very slowly progressive basis to implement this new law, which is known as Senate Bill 659.
In about 30 seconds or less, are you generally optimistic about the coming session of the legislature?
Well, yes, I'm optimistic, Doug. Of course, we must always be optimistic. The legislature is going to have more money to appropriate, more new money, I'm told, than any legislature recently. And we hope that, that higher education needs will merit the favorable consideration for a high priority rating when they get to the matter of dividing up the funds available.
Our guest this week on Headliners has been Dr. E.T. Dunlap, the Chancellor of Higher Education. This is Doug Fox speaking. Headliners, a discussion with people who make the news. A public affairs presentation of the Oklahoma News Network. This program has been pre-recorded.